All right, hello, this is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going through a series of payroll applications that I've tried to pretty much put in sync with the textbook that we're using, the PDF, which is starting out with Java from Control Structures Through Objects, 6th edition by Tony Gaddis. So for Chapter 1, I did a very simple payroll program that was hard-coded where the values didn't change. Then in Chapter 2, for Java Fundamentals, I wrote two variations of this payroll program. The first that used a scanner object where we could read in things from the keyboard, and the second which used a show input dialog for the input and a show message dialog for the output, which was a little bit more GUI-like. From there, we went on and into Chapter 3, where we talked about decision structures. What I added in Chapter 3 were a few different things. First, we brought in the idea of using some constants and the word final, which is a keyword in Java. We also, for our payroll application, allowed the user to get overtime if she or he worked more than 40 hours a week. So that was the if statement that we used in there. Then in Chapter 4, we kind of had a mixed bag. We used loops. I added some validation. All right, I added some validation using do-while loops, while loops, plus I think that we put a for loop in there to make this go through this 5 times. I tried doing some work with files and had mixed results, so I just stopped right there, and to be honest with you, I did not go any further. Now, Chapter 5 is nothing new. It's on methods. We've already talked about methods, but I've decided anyway to do a couple things. The first is I'm going to come in here and let's see. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and create a new project, Java. No template. The location will be right here. It'll be payroll number 5A. Finish. You've seen this many times before. Right mouse click on our source folder. Choose new Java class. edu.rankin.jpscott.payroll with a big P. Everything else is in lowercase. All right, I'm going to remove this, because what I've done is I have brought in, well, let's see if I still have it in my clipboard. No, I do not. But what I had done is I had brought in the previous program that we had worked on earlier. And that is right here. As you can see, it's getting up there in lines. It's 283 lines. And right now, this program is exactly like the program in the previous chapter. All right? And for the first time, I am going to change a couple things. I am going to get rid of the file stuff. So this import IO is gone, which means this print writer is now gone, which means this throws file not found exception is gone, and I don't need this print writer. That's gone. And I think it's got to go down way to the bottom of the program here and get rid of all this now. That's gone. And these two out files are also gone. All right. So I've cut down about, I don't know, maybe 30 lines or so out of my code. And if I go and run this right now, let's make sure we didn't break anything. File, save all, run, payroll, because it's the first time we're running it. We should have 5 employees. You've seen this before, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing I've done previously. Jeff, Paul, Scott, 61, false, 1, 40, 25. There's all my information. I made $1,000, no overtime. Spelled my name wrong, but you get the idea. All right, let's continue on then. Sandra K. Scott. All right, so that's everything. Let's double check. Make sure it all came out okay. All right. First was me, $1,000. Sandra, $2,750, so that makes $3,750. 4,200 and $3,750 is $7,950. $7,950 and $5,950 is about $13,900 if I'm adding right. $13,900, $14,900, $16,100, and it looks like that was verified here. All right, so everything is working. That's good. The difference, so to speak, here is what I'd like to do in this particular example is to really go through this code, probably in more depth and breadth of coverage than I've done previously. All right? It is not mandatory that you have a package. Virtually all programs that you create will have one. A package is more or less like a root directory or a main folder or a top-level folder in which everything else is put. All right? In this case, it's all of our Java code is put in here. You see the packages edu.rankin.jpscott. Again, typically it's what's referred to as reverse domain notation. You don't use an @ sign, but rather than jpscott@rankin.edu, it's edu.rankin.jpscott. We've got two import statements in here. These import statements are similar to the using type of statements that we used in C#. They allow us to bring in pre-written code. The first one, which has got the code in there so that we can set up a decimal format pattern, or in our case, patterns. The second one actually defines the show input dialog and the show message dialog. All right? And as you've already seen, if you do not put in the required import statements and you use something that requires them, typically you'll get some kind of a squiggly underline. If you put your mouse where the squiggly underline is and do an Alt-Enter, it'll usually add the equivalent import statement for you. All right. Next, we have our class header, public class payroll. Remember, public got to be a lowercase, class got to be a lowercase, payroll, that name is typically an uppercase, and it must be the same name as the name you see up here. Then we have a series of both, and I can add this, declare and initialize global constants. And we have about what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9 of them. you'll notice that the first two are integers because when you ask a person their age, typically they give it to you in a whole number. I just arbitrarily used, not totally arbitrarily, but I used 18 and 25. 18 because it's the legal age in many states. 125 because this is and actually we changed this to an int. I just noticed that. We don't have that being of type byte anymore as we did previously. But I think that age down here is of type byte. Now, bytes aren't really used very often in programming, just so you know. In fact, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this to an int. Now, when I do that, there's some places in here that are going to now be in error. All right, notice I've got age there. There's age, and it's returning a byte. No, it should return an int. All right, now this should now say integer dot parse int. There may be other places that are still wrong. Let's see once. Oh, this is also, that line has got to be put here. There we go. That removed all of those errors. The Boolean is fine. The ints here are fine. And I think that got rid of all the errors we had. Now, I do want to mention to you, it's not that there's anything that is wrong with making this down here a byte. But since the numbers we're using up here are both ints, a byte is smaller in size, but typically not used just because it's got such a limited range. Now, you could argue and say, well, wait a minute. Negative 128 to positive 127 should be big enough for an age, and it should. I can't give you a real good reason, but bytes are just not used very often. So I've got my minimum age, my maximum age, the minimum number of hours you can work, the maximum number of hours you can work. You'll notice both of these are doubles because it is possible to work a portion of an hour. In much the same way, it is possible to make a portion of $1. All right? And here we've got our maximum non-OT. We could have made that an int. All right? But since we're working in here with hours as doubles, I made this a double. The overtime rate must be a double or a float. Remember that if I change this to float, now I get an error here unless I put an F there or a capital F. All right? I don't like doing that. Again, you find that most often, even though it's a little bit of a waste of space, most programmers end up making their variables that have decimal places in them doubles, so they don't have to worry about that F. Finally, I've got my total number of employees. All right? So, I can also come in and declare and initialize my global variables. Now, these are global because they are defined outside of any method. Constants, never a problem. But with variables, the idea is what you should do at least is shoot for having as few of these as you can. If you look up here, you'll notice private field input string is never used. Wow, I never used the input string. Okay, I guess I can get rid of that then. And that'll get rid of one of my errors. Field can be converted to a local variable name. And that's this one right here. All right. So what they're telling me is, where am I using output string? Well, let's take a look. I don't like the fact that doesn't look right. Oh, I know what that is. I've got to come down here and change that in my calculate grows. Nope. In here. This has got to be an int. Okay, that got rid of that. What I'm doing is I'm starting to work my way through here and trying to get rid of some of these warning messages that are used. Notice it says 27 warnings found, 9 typos found. And I can take my mouse and put it over there. Now, I've got output string right here. Am I using output string anyplace else? Or where am I using output string? If the only place that I am using output string is right here, and it looks as though it is, all right, then probably, let's see, we'll find out real quick, but I'm going to grab this. All right, now I've got to come down here because I'm going to get an error message, and I'm going to try to add it right here. Since it's local, the static and all that other stuff is unnecessary. All right, so declare and initialize local variable. All right, and it looks like that got rid of, so you'll notice that now I'm down to, it says that all of these initializers are redundant. So let's look. I probably could have created all those variables inside of here. Now it's telling me that it's redundant, so what I'm wondering is if I get rid of this, it still says that it's redundant. And it tells me if I want more. Control F1. This inspection points out the cases where a variable value is never used after its assignment. Never gets read, it's always overwritten, etc. So probably what I could do is to just come in here and do this. Let's grab all of these. First, let's come in here and set it back to the way it was. All right. Now what I'm wondering is if I go in here and I comment out all of this, I'm going to get a bunch of errors, but don't worry about it. All right. And then if I come in here and I put in string, 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 int, Boolean, int, double, double, and double. Now you'll notice that all of those went away. All right, so now it's telling me that I'm down to 18 warnings. Now you could come up with your own determination over whether what I did here or what I did down here is a better way of doing it. I'm not real sure one way or the other, but since the system liked it like that, you can see what I'm doing. So this is main. Main is a driver. Now what I'm doing is literally with this commented out. I'm going to leave the comments in there, but with that commented out, that means that this is all main. So notice what main is doing. It's declaring variables, but it's assigning the result of input first name, input middle name, input last name, input age, input union status, input employee number, input hours worked, input hourly rate, and calculate gross pay. All right. Make your own determinations here, but you can say, I think at least, I used very good names for both my variables and for my method names. And this display final, originally I had that inside of the loop, so it was displaying for every employee. I only wanted to display at the end, so it must be outside of the loop. All right, so let's look at each one of these routines in here. Okay, it's not mandatory. You notice that it was okay to just put static there. But then you have to also start thinking, do I want this routine to be able to be called from the outside? And typically the answer is at least possibly. So you're typically going to find these being public. So this one says I've got a variable called FN for first name. It's a string. And I'm going to say, please enter the first name. Just in case the user happens to put in blank spaces, we trim any leading spaces and any trailing spaces. After we've trimmed them, if all we have left now is the empty string, we ask them to do it again. Eventually, hopefully they put something in, we fall out of the loop and we return that for the first name. We then do the same exact thing for the middle name, and the same exact thing for the last name. So I'm not going to go over those. They are the same. Then we have the age. And you'll notice with the age, we're returning an integer. We're doing a different kind of validation in here. All right? These programs will still blow up. This program will blow up if I put a non-integer value in right here or here. But as long as I put in an integer, while it's less than the minimum age, which we said was 18, or it's greater than the maximum age, which we said was 125, we have them do it again. So when we get down to here, so the idea is, once we get down to here, we've got a valid first name. Once we get down to here, we've got a valid middle name. Once we get down to here, we've got a valid last name. Once we get down to here, we've got a valid age. We are not doing any validation here. It may have been better to put this in and then literally put in, for example, \n, \n plus true or false. Something like that, so that the user has some kind of an idea over what they are supposed to be inputting. All right? But we just tell them to do it, boom. We probably don't even need, we probably could just say right here, return this. So sometimes there's ways to shortcut different things. All right? But I'm going to leave it the way it is. Okay, they're recommending here that we return true or false. Probably not a bad idea. All right, so if it's true, return true. Otherwise, return false. Never hurts. You know, I guess you could say that it's probably better programming quality, for lack of better words, to put it in like that. The code is a little longer, all right, but it probably at least makes a little more sense. Now they're saying we can remove the braces because they are redundant because there's only one line. I don't think so. So, public here, public here. We didn't have any requirements here for the number. We actually could put in a negative number here, which is silly, but we could have done it. All right. Our input hours worked and our input hourly rate are virtually the same routine, except in one case we're wanting a value between 0 and 84, and that's for the hours worked. And the other one, we want a value between 0 and 100, and that's for the hourly rate. Always make sure when you do this, because I did more than my share of of copy and paste. That if I'm going to copy this to here, make sure that you change all these hours to rates. All right, then we had our gross pay. This was the first time we actually looked at and saw some actual Java doc comments. And there are a lot of sites. I looked, and I'm still going to have to find where I've got that one, but Java doc comments. Documentation comments. The compiler ignores everything. Yeah. The Java doc tool uses doc comments when preparing automatically generated documentation that looks more, that's not a good example at all. I don't think this was the one. Maybe it is. I don't think so. A little bit of stuff in here on Java doc. I'll tell you what, I'll put that in there. And I will put that in right here just so that we actually have a Java doc reference. All right, it's right there. Okay, so in our gross pay, if the hours worked was less than or equal to 40, it's straight time. Otherwise, we figured it out. Okay, and either way, we added their gross pay to the total gross pay, which was a global variable, and we returned the gross pay. We can only return one value. It's not exactly true, but we haven't talked about arrays yet, so we'll make this public. Here's our display. All right. Where all we did was to display everything, including the patterns with no decimal place, or I'm sorry, with no $sign or with a $sign. Okay, and here also, here is where we put it into an option pane with a show message dialog. Here's where we displayed it on screen. Here's where we had our final one. Now, since I declared output string in here, I could come back again and put it in here. All right. In fact, technically, I don't even need an output string. I could just grab this and, for lack of better words, just kind of grab everything that's in here, copy it, right, we can make this public, and that pretty much is everything. And hopefully you think that I've done a fairly decent job of explaining this to you. So file, let's do a save all, let's run this one last time to make sure we didn't ruin anything or break anything or whatever. It should look very similar to the way it's looked before. Jeff, Paul, Scott, the only thing I do want to fix is I'm a little anal here. Actually, I like the way that is. That's good. So that's the first one. Notice I now have the true or false there. Try to make it easier for the person. So all right, now with a moment of truth, total pay for all five employees is $21,900, and I should have all of that same information that you just saw down here. There's me, there's Sandy, there's Taylor, there's Mackenzie, there's Chloe, there's the final information. So again, hopefully you've got something out of that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to start taking this and I'm going to start whittling this away, for lack of better words. So in other words, what I'm telling you here, what I'm going to actually be doing here is I'm going to be removing some of the stuff that's here. Why? Because we're about to get into the object-oriented realm of Java. And I don't necessarily think I need, for example, to have a first name, middle name, and last name is fine. I don't really think I need the age. I don't really think I need the union or the employee number. So we're just going to have first name, middle name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, and gross pay, just so that the size of our programs can be manageable. That's all. So I'll be back to start, as I said, kind of whittling that away, for lack of better words, in just a couple minutes.